Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. And I figured, hey, let's do a surprise live here on the channel and discuss everything Texas Tech men's basketball, because Lord knows there is a ton to discuss right now in the realm of Texas Tech men's basketball, whether we're talking the portal, whether we're talking the latest coaching hire, whether it's what is this roster going to look like. We'll discuss a ton of that and much more on today's video. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and join over 10,000 Red Raiders here on the most subscribed to Texas Tech YouTube channel in the Back to 12 podcast channel. And while we're getting some people in here, I know slowly but surely, this is a weird time. It just happened to work best for me tonight when it came down to doing a live. I want to see you like the video, obviously, but let me know where you're watching from in the comments as well. Are you watching from DFW out there in Lubbock? You watching from somewhere far, far away? No, not talking Netherlands, but just let me know where you're watching from in the comments for a shout out. And be sure to get your questions in there as well when it comes to anything Texas Tech men's basketball, as there is a lot to discuss right now in this realm, as I mentioned, because, man, it is one of those times right now where it felt like there was a lot of positives going on for Texas Tech, and now it almost feels like, oh man, you have to wonder a little bit on some things. But again, like the video if you haven't already, and we'll give a few shout outs here later on. And I want to jump right into this because I think that there's really a few guys now that Texas Tech fans are looking at when it comes to the portal at the current state it's in. Obviously, Osobor landing at Washington and being a primary target for the Red Raiders. He's off the board after landing, just a crazy amount of money by Washington. $2.2 million is the reported NIL deal for great Osobor. Shout out to him. Get the bag, young man. But my goodness, he is now the highest known paid college basketball player in the country going into next season. So there's a lot to look at there in that regard. Obviously, Texas Tech was one of the final three schools he was deciding over, but instead went with the bag, and you can't hate a kid for that. Now, there's a couple of other names that I know a lot of Tech fans want to know more about. I talked about them a little bit in yesterday's video if you want to go back and watch that, but we'll discuss it here in the live as well, where let's start with Mr. White. Trazarien White, the UNC Wilmington transfer. It is down to Texas Tech and TCU. I fully expect tomorrow when he announces his decision on where he will be playing college basketball next year, it will be in the Big 12 and it will be in Fort Worth. I don't think he lands at Texas Tech from everything we're hearing over at the Scarlet and Black Insider. Obviously things can change, but it sounds like that's the route he's going to go, and he will play for Jamie Dixon in, well, that ugly purple next year in Fort Worth, if I'm being honest about it. Now, when it comes to JT Toppin, this one has been a roller coaster because there's a lot of information, and I've gotten multiple texts today about how maybe his mom was the one that was the deciding factor in all of this. Maybe. I haven't heard that, but it's definitely possible that she was a strong influence, and as she should be in some ways. But the JT Toppin recruitment is so fascinating in the sense of, if you don't know who JT Toppin is, he is a forward from New Mexico, originally from the DFW area, and his best friend is actually Jazz Henderson Jr., a Texas Tech walk-on, and he has a close relationship with Texas Tech men's basketball general manager Kellen Buffington as well. So there's strong ties to Texas Tech, and a lot of people are saying, like, hey, like, JT wanted to come to Texas Tech. I think that was the plan in a lot of ways, but it seems like right now, after everything I've heard, and I know a lot of other people are saying the same thing, that UT is in the lead right now to land him. And he was thought to be a guy that Texas Tech had a strong chance to land. And there's a real strong chance now that Texas Tech goes over 3 on the 3 big portal targets that they've had over the past 10 days. And great Osobor, then you've got Traverius White, and then obviously JT Toppin. So it's one of those things where when you swing and miss this late in the portal, where do you turn? And we'll talk about some portal guys that Jacob Harris over on the Scarlet and Black Insider brought up earlier on the site, and a lot of intriguing names. But I'll be fully honest with you guys. I think some of you guys are going to be disappointed, and rightfully so, in the sense of hearing some of these names, because you thought Texas Tech was at least going to land one of them, right? Like, I think that that's a fair notion or fair thing to put out there. And as it stands right now, you can see at the bottom of your screen the roster for Texas Tech. And if you haven't already, be sure to like the video. And we'll hit that subscribe button too, and join over 10,000 Red Raiders here on the Back to 12 podcast channel, the most subscribed to Texas Tech YouTube channel right now. And we're giving you daily videos 100% free. Nobody else is doing that. So this is the roster you have currently right now, and I've kind of laid it out for you. 1 star equals a transfer, 2 stars equal high school scholarship, 3 equal walk-on, and if they don't have a star next to their name, they're a returnee. Currently, Texas Tech has 4 open scholarships, and you thought, really, when it came down to it, that you were going to land one of those 3 guys, maybe even 2 of them, and you were going to have 2 scholarships left. Well, that's not the case. And so now you go in, and I think they've done a solid job at landing some really, really actually solid guys in the portal. You got 3 guys, guy that I'm really high on, and Kevin Overton from Drake. You got Fetty Squared, obviously, from Pittsburgh, and then you have Elijah Hawkins as well. So you've landed 3 guys in the portal you feel good about, okay? But there's one thing that is blatantly obvious right now when you look at this Texas Tech roster, and it's they do not have enough front court depth. I mean, simple and plain, they just don't. If Fetty is your starting center, you better have another center that's at or just slightly below his skill level. Because, I mean, I think if you look at it right now, and I don't think this is a hot take or anything, Fetty is not as good as Warren Washington. I don't think I'm throwing anything hot out there in terms of a take, but he is a solid center. I think one that Texas Tech is very happy to have because they think they're going to land another one. And I think that they thought that was going to be Great or maybe JT. And as it stands right now, obviously Great has committed to UW. It doesn't look like JT Toppin is going to be a Red Raider. And in fact, it seems like it's a heavy lean towards UT right now as he goes through the draft process. Now, there's a lot of things that can happen, as we know, in the portal, but that's where it stands right now. I think for me, when you think about where does Texas Tech go from here, and we're going to throw some names out here in just a second, but before we do, we got a couple people watching. Let's give a couple shout outs. And if you, hey, want to get a shout out, let me know where you're watching from. Let me know that you like the video as well. We got Old Texas Tech Man in Tulsa. We've got Mr. Diaz out there in Mission. We've got Tahoka. We've got Lawrence, Kansas. We've also got Albuquerque. We've got another Kansas. Let me get a shout out. We've got, Austin, Texas in the house right there. It is Tarrantuna 8844. We've got Jace and Alexis Baker, and Daryl there as well. We've got Ryder from Prosper. So we're all over the place right now. San Antonio's in here. Houston, Adam from Houston. Ryder from Prosper, as I mentioned. Bob out in the Hub City, the 806. We've got Naples, Florida. Not too bad. I wouldn't mind being close to a beach right now. Wouldn't we all, if we're being honest? But y'all are here to talk, well, at least hear about Texas Tech men's basketball. We'll get to some guys that I think Texas Tech could be interested in, and this is from Jacob Harris over on the Scarlet and Black Insider. He's done a phenomenal job with the Portal Report. You may know over on Twitter. He works over at the Scarlet and Black Insider as well and really keeps up to date with everything going on in the transfer portal. He listed over on the website some guys that Texas Tech may pivot to now in the portal because it feels like that's where they're going to have to go. But before we do, I kind of want to talk about Jeff Linder because Texas Tech has their Dave Smart replacement. And when you look at that, it's like, okay, I think a lot of people, and I'm not trying to speak for you guys, but I think a lot of people are like, who the hell is Jeff Linder, right? Well, for those that don't know, Jeff Linder was an assistant coach on Grant McCaslin's staff when they won a JUCO national title there at Midland College. They are friends dating back 20 years. Now, Linder has done a decent job at Wyoming. I think I'm not going to say a great job, but a decent job, probably closer to good because of how really abysmal the NIL program is up there in Laramie. And you can understand that it's a mid-major, but he did take the Cowboys to the NCAA tournament with a 25-9 record, not this past season or the season before that, but 3 years ago. He is a guy that kind of is known as an offensive guy, but more of the European variety. And you can see that in some of the guys he's recruited. He's a really good recruiter in terms of going north of the border to Canada. He's also got this unique offensive skill set that really, really helps guys and throws a different look at defenses at the collegiate ranks when he has the right guys. And when he has the right guys in his system, it's pretty damn good offense, actually, when you come down to it. But for me, obviously, there was the factor that Grant McCasland knows him, right? That's big. But I think the more that I look at Linder and the more that I do research on what kind of coach he is and the lead assistant that he could potentially be, I think he's a guy that has the chance to not be Dave Smart, because I'll go ahead and say this. I don't think you can replace Dave Smart in terms of equal level unless you go out and get, a superstar, because I think Dave Smart is really, truly one of those one-of-one kind of coaches, and I think he's going to do an outstanding job at Pacific. But Linder's a good coach, and he comes in and he's your lead assistant. I think you're going to see a lot more of a European-style type of basketball for Texas Tech, and that's not to say, you're not going to see some traditional American-type things, but I think you're going to see more bigs in terms of fluidity out on the arc and being able to beat you off the dribble. You go look at some of the recruits that he has. I mean, he had a top 160 recruit in this top 250 recruit, in this past class commit to Wyoming. He's out of his NIL agreement there, or national letter of intent, NLI. My goodness, there's too many I's, L's, and N's around here. Anyway, that's kind of the mold you're going to see. I think Texas Tech may transition towards that with Linder there. And also, you have to think about it from this perspective. If you're Linder, this is just, a no-brainer, right? In terms of, you're going to see a lot more of this, and you've seen it in college football. I think you're going to see it in college basketball now too, where you see mid-major coaches where maybe they're quote-unquote on the hot seat or nearing it, like Linder was. Like, there's no guarantee that he wouldn't have been fired if he didn't make the NCAA tournament next year at Wyoming, and it was going to be difficult for him because he lost a lot of guys to the portal and to graduation. So you think about it from that perspective, in the sense of he gets to reset the clock in terms of his coaching career, not having a fired on his resume from Wyoming. He gets to go coach with one of his good friends in Grant McCasland in the best league in America. He's a lead assistant, actually gets a pay raise, right? Think about that. He goes from being the head coach at Wyoming, gets a pay raise, to being the lead assistant at Texas Tech, and he has better job security. It's kind of a no-brainer for him. And I think from the standpoint of, I gave a grade to it, I think I gave it a B. I think that's probably where I'm going to stay. I think Dave Smart was an A+ hire last year. I think Linder's probably closer to a B, maybe a B+ kind of deal. But I do think that he has some base offensive principles that I think Texas Tech is going to do very, very well with. I'm very interested to see how he utilizes Darion Williams in those principles, because I think Darion Williams is the kind of archetype type player that Linder would love to have be a lead guy in his type of offense. And wouldn't you know it, now he does at Texas Tech. So that's kind of really my, synopsis of what's going on there. Summary. I don't know. Words were never my strong suit sometimes, but it is what it is. We got a couple more people in here. Danny asked, Trazarien leaning TCU. Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if he isn't a Horned Frog when he announces tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure on what time he plans to announce, but I would be really, really surprised if he's a Red Raider. We've got Mr. Roberts out there in Fishers, Indiana. We've got Garrett Stark in Richardson, Texas. Again, if you want to shout out, be sure to tell me where you're watching from. Let me know if you like the video, if you're subscribed. And if you aren't subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button. All right. I said we wanted to get into some of these latest portal, maybe not targets, but maybe some guys that the Red Raiders could pivot to, because if we're being honest, let's just be real about this. It's not very likely that Texas Tech, let alone lands Osobor. He's already committed to Washington, right? But the Red Raiders land JT Toppin as it stands right now. And I think that was the guy that Texas Tech really wanted in this portal cycle, had strong ties to Texas Tech with Buff, the GM there. They go way back to when JT was like 14, I think. Obviously, JT's best friend is on the team, as well as a walk-on in Jess Henderson Jr., and there's other Tech ties there as well. Now, when it comes down to some guys that I think Texas Tech could pivot to, I thought, again, Jacob Harris did a phenomenal job over on the Scarlet and Black Insider. Let's just list a couple of those names. And the main one that I think a lot of people are talking about is Anchor. He's linked to Auburn, Kansas State, I believe Oklahoma, and then Louisville in terms of those guys. I don't know for sure if the prior commitment to Louisville in terms of prior, the forward from South Florida, impacts Anchor, but there's some big programs going after him. He's 6'9", a junior. He averaged, looking at it right now, 6.1 rebounds and 16.1 points per game last year at Samford. He's 6'9", uber athletic, originally from Australia. He's a guy that's interesting, but it might be too late in the process to land a guy like that. You've got A.J. Braun from Wright State. He averaged 12 points per game, 6.2 rebounds. He's 6'9", 225 from Dayton, Ohio, a guy that's super physical down low, isn't afraid to body people, maybe not the most athletic big in the world, but definitely understands his skill set, and a guy that's going to set really good pick and rolls and maybe is something that Grant McCasland looks at. You've got Issei Muhammad. He's 6'9", a forward from UT Martin. He averaged 11.1 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, and is originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Also spent time at New Mexico State the year prior. So a guy with some high-level mid-major experience there at New Mexico State, looking to make a jump to the Power 5 ranks. Is he a starter? I don't know, but I do think that he would be a serviceable big, maybe off of the bench for Texas Tech if they do go that route. One of the most interesting guys in the portal that was really gaining a lot of steam is Supreme Cook. By the way, y'all know how I feel about names and nicknames. Supreme Cook, come on. Baller as hell right there. Anyway, let's talk about his game a little bit. Georgetown guy, 6'9", East Orange, New Jersey. Averaged 10.5 points, 8 rebounds last year at Georgetown. Transferred in the year prior from Fairfield. He's the guy that's averaged 10 points or more in each year of his college career, except for his true freshman season. He's pretty athletic. I mean, watching his film, I think he would fit in pretty well with Grant McCasland in the pick and roll system. But really the thing that I'm looking for Grant McCasland and potential pivots is I want somebody that is really good in the pick and roll. Okay, that's really what you want here if you're the Red Raiders, because that's what Grant McCasland runs the most. They're a pick and roll heavy system, and I think they're going to want to play 4 out, 1 in. And what I mean by that is 4 guys on the perimeter and 1 big that's close to the basket that can come up, set screens, and then there's a bunch of free space for shooters to run around and really find open spots to hopefully get open looks. Now, another guy that's a little interesting to me in the sense of where he could potentially go from the standpoint of I like his frame, but I don't know if he's good enough from the standpoint of coming in and actually playing big-time minutes for Texas Tech. And that would be Dominic Portland. He's from Lehigh, 6'9", power forward center. He's hearing from mid-majors as well as high majors. He's from British Columbia. He's averaging 11.5 points per game last year at Lehigh, 6.3 rebounds per game. Also had about 1 block in there as well. He's a guy that is, I think, interesting from the standpoint of skill set. Again, 6'9", when you look at him, 250, big dude, almost the same size as Great Osobor, not in that class when it comes down to actual skills, but same kind of build if you think about it that way. That's the thing that's most important to me is I think Texas Tech needs some quote-unquote beef down on the low block, because you think about what Fetty brings to the table. He's a long, athletic guy, but he's slender. He's 225, uber athletic. Then you got Ameli Alahu. What do you expect from him in year number 2 out in the 806? I think you have 2 serviceable guys, but this is going to be a lot of rotating because there's not very many bigs right now in the portal that you're like, okay, that's an instant starter right there, let alone guys that have interest right now in Texas Tech as it stands right now. And I want to preface this. It's the portal. Things can change in the blink of an eye, right? Like that's just how things go. Let's get to the chat real quick. We've got Justin in here watching from Dallas. Freaking Mavericks, man. Pissed me off so much last night, Justin. Sucks that we're likely going to be out on Toppin after such strong start and all of the Tech ties. Pretty big oops from the Staps, in my opinion. Yeah, I think and Ryder just asked, why is Toppin leaning Texas? Yeah. We can talk about Toppin a little bit. At the very beginning of the process, I was told like, hey, he's probably going to come to Texas Tech. Cool. And I put that on the site. I was wrong about that in the sense of like things change in the portal, right? So, hand up, accountability on my part. But from my understanding on the recruitment is JT Toppin. And again, this is what I've heard. Haven't heard it from him. This is from a source kind of deal. There's a lot of people in the mix here, and his agency is looking for certain things when it comes down to it. I think the most important aspect to the people involved, may be the money factor. And there's rumors today, and there's been rumors for really a week now, that JT wants to come to Tech, that maybe his camp doesn't want him to go there. And I heard the rumor today that, his mom likes Austin better than Lubbock. And yeah, okay, like I guess. But I think from the JT standpoint, the thing that really stands out to me, and again, this is me thinking like you guys in this regard. I haven't heard this from, a source staff member, anything like that. The thing I wonder is, did going after both great Osobor and JT Toppin at the same time impacts Texas Tech's ability to land JT Toppin? I think that you could make the argument, yes. Would I make that argument? Probably not, because I think the staff can recruit multiple guys at one time. They do it all the time. But I wonder if from the standpoint of, do you have the almost idea from the JT Toppin side of like, oh, they're going after another big that could potentially go there. Maybe they're not as interested in me. Let's go see what happens. It also doesn't help that Texas threw a bag at him. I mean, Texas Tech threw a bag at him too, but UT's throwing a bag and then a quote unquote other stuff is what I've heard. So, it's one of those deals where right now, from everything we're hearing at Scarlet and Black Insider, he's a lean toward Texas right now. That doesn't mean things can change. But I will say this. I don't think he's making his decision just because, quote unquote, his mom is rumored to like Austin more than Texas Tech. I don't think that that's the thing that's making his decision. Okay. I don't think that that's the case. I think there's also money at play. I also think that there's, potential, visibility. I think that there's a lot of things at play. The name on the front of the jersey, in terms of notoriety and everything like that. So there's a lot more to it than just mom would rather go to Austin than Lubbock, I think. And that's kind of where you're at. I mean, if you would have asked me a week ago, I would have told you I think JT Toppin ends up in the Scarlet and Black. I don't think so right now, personally. All right, let's get to some of your comments. We're about 24 minutes in. If you haven't already, well, be sure to like the video and get your comments, and we're going to the Q&A portion. Tell your friends, tell your mom, your dad, your son, your daughter, get in here. Ask some tech questions. Okay, you don't have to, but, I mean, it would be cool if you added some on there for us. And if you haven't already, be sure to like the video, like I said, and hit that subscribe button. Join 10,000 strong Red Raiders here on the largest Texas Tech YouTube channel and the Back to 12 podcast channel for daily Texas Tech videos. We're going to be start talking about football here. Texas Tech may be landing a football commit here in the not too distant future from a Big 12. Well, I don't want to call them a rival. That's too strong. But a Big 12 opponent, potentially. Nothing confirmed yet, but that could happen. But get your questions in, like the video, and if you haven't already, Be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay in the know on all things Texas Tech men's basketball and football all year long right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it's 100% free. So there you go. Let's see. We've got, hey, you pronounced, yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. That was a guess, but I'm glad I pronounced your name right. That's always good to hear. This from Tuna8844. Dang, bro. Let's just put it up on the screen, shall we? Dang, bro. Going from Osobor, Toppin, White, and now hearing the guys you're naming is night and day difference. Yeah, I told you might be disappointed. And to be fair, these are just some of the names that are in the portal currently as it stands right now that kind of fit that criteria that maybe Texas Tech would want in the front court. And I wasn't mentioning guards or anything. There's going to be some other names that Texas Tech goes after that are maybe surprising to other people in the sense that, you know, hey, maybe some guys from the NBA draft, Texas Tech may land one of them. I know somebody just asked about it here in the chat. We'll talk about him here in just a second when I answer your question. But yeah, it's a night and day difference when you're going after big time guys in the portal. And now you may not end up with any of them. And now you're left kind of like, what do we do almost in a way? So yeah, this from Danny Hart. And I also want to give a shout out to Ryder Franks asking the same question. What happened to the forward from Washington State? Yes, Jalen Wells. He is from Sacramento, California. I actually mentioned him and did a breakdown of his game here on the channel not too long ago. Let me pull up those notes real quick for you guys so we can actually talk about him in terms of, well, what he brings to the table. I will say this. There's a lot to discuss from the Jalen Wells side of things. He didn't have a good day today up in Chicago, up at the draft combine. So that's one thing. But he has Texas Tech ties in a lot of ways. Okay. But first, let's talk about kind of his stats and everything, because he's a pretty polarizing player right now for Texas Tech fans in the sense of you seemingly struck out on those other three guys in terms of Osobor, White, and Toppin. Obviously, White making his announcement tomorrow, and then you have Toppin going through the NBA draft process. He had a pretty solid day from a stat sheet stuffing perspective up in Chicago, but is a heavy lean, or shouldn't say heavy, a lean towards UT right now. And Jalen Wells has been speculated to have, well, Texas Tech have interest in him. So let's talk about it real quick. He's 6'8", 205 as a true freshman up there in Pullman for the Cougars at Washington State, averaged just under 13 points per game, under 5 rebounds per game at 4.6, 1.2 assists. That was as a sophomore, excuse me. He shot 41.7% from three on 5 attempts per game. He is a legitimate lights-out shooter. And the thing that gets interesting with him is not only the fact that, first and foremost, he's going through the NBA draft process. So there's that. But he's also a native of Sacramento, California, as I mentioned. That may ring a bell to some people, and the reason being is that's where D5 is from, Darion Williams, and Chance McMillan is from an area close to it. D5 is really good friends with Jalen Wells. They actually played AAU ball together, and their families are super close, according to multiple people I've talked to about Jalen Wells and his potential recruitment. He's a guy that I know Texas Tech is very interested in. I think that there's interest back. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be a Red Raider, because if he does decide to leave the NBA draft process and come back to college, he will be one of the more highly targeted and highly coveted players in the portal cycle. But he is an absolute there's no other way to say it than he's a sniper. He ranked 99th percentile on spot-up shots, according to Synergy, ranked 91st percentile nationally on jump shots, 89th percentile off the catch and shoot, 89th percentile off the dribble, 90th percentile on guarded jumpers, 71st percentile on unguarded. He's good as a primary ball handler for his size and pick and roll. He ranked 91st percentile in that aspect. And he's a switchable guard that can guard really 1 through 4. I call him a guard. He's more of just a hybrid guy. I mean, again, you heard his size right there in the sense of 6'8", 205. I think he could be a guy that starts alongside D5 if he were to come to the Texas Tech. And D5 play the 4 just because he's a little bulkier. And then you have Wells at, well, the 3 spot, and you could have a potential starting lineup of maybe Fetty. Maybe you get another big to go along with him. D5, Wells, Overton, McMillan, whoever you want at the 2 spot. And then obviously Elijah Hawkins. So he's a name to monitor. I don't think anything is imminent right now, at least from what we're hearing over at the Scarlet and Black Insider. And but he's a guy that you need to know in terms of his name because there are heavy ties to the program. I know that him and D5, like I said, are very close. They talk often. Their parents talk often. So they're very, very close in that regard. And it would not shock me if he does come to the 806, but he is going to be, once again, one of the most highly coveted guys in this portal cycle if he does decide to come back to college basketball. All right. Let's see. Where does Cambridge fit in? Isn't he 7 foot? Nah, he's around 6'6". He would be your small ball 5 if he's healthy. But the thing is with Cambridge is how healthy is he going to be? I think that's a fair question in the sense of, he had a pretty big knee injury last year. And he's going through the process. He's already been working out, doing jump rope activities and stuff. You've seen that over on his Instagram if you follow him there. Bounce Man 35. But I mean, he's a guy where I'm interested to see how far along he is once practice actually starts. Because in my mind, I didn't think he'd be back until Big 12 play, but maybe he's a little bit before that. And if you remember last year, I get it, it was non-con, but I could make the argument that Texas Tech's best lineup last year, really for any given stretch, was when they went small. And I think they would have had an even higher success rate in conference play if Devin Cambridge was healthy with that small ball lineup. Now, maybe there's long-term effects to that knee injury that really he's working out for a large portion of the year, but he's a guy that I think could have a huge impact and a guy that probably comes off the bench at first because they want to monitor his minutes, but I would not be surprised once the season gets rolling next year if he's playing closer to, 25, 30 minutes a game if Texas Tech needs him, because I don't think it's arguably, he is your best defender when he's healthy, and he's easily your most versatile wing. I mean, it's not close in that regard. So he's definitely a guy to monitor, but more on the health side and see how they kind of ease him into things moving forward. All right. Let's see. This is a football one. Okay. Once the south end zone is completed, will we go all in on NIL, possibly raise what we've already give our players and get high-end players in the portal in every sport? Well, I mean, shout out to softball. They have like the #1 recruiting class. They got absolutely snubbed to Coach Snyder's crew. They definitely should have made the tournament. Football has done a phenomenal job. Obviously, they're paying everybody $25K, and that's why you're seeing preferred walk-ons come to Texas Tech, right? And because of NIL, you're landing guys that are former 4-star guys. A perfect example is Javion Wilcox, Micah Hudson's half-brother, transferring in from TCU. He's a preferred walk-on. And the reason he came here is because he's a preferred walk-on that's going to get $25,000 and also probably get academic scholarships and NIL opportunities, which will more than make up the difference in terms of him having to, quote-unquote, pay for school. So that's kind of what you're seeing there. In terms of paying players more, it's going to start with football. Football's king, right? I think from the high-end players' perspective, that's just going to come down to where they want to go and who throws the most money at them a lot of ways. I think Texas Tech is really in a good spot for where they're at as a program athletically in the national scene. From an NIL perspective, I think they do a phenomenal job. But sometimes, I'm not trying to shit on anyone or anything, but it's like sometimes you're just not going to be able to compete with Microsoft money or Apple money or Amazon money or whatever the hell type money great Osobor is getting from the University of Washington. Now, Texas Tech obviously has some great alumni that pour their heart and soul and their dollars into the programs and everything. Perfect example, Womble, Cody Campbell. There's a ton of them that I can't even name right now. But sometimes there's aspects of this in the NIL space that really, really go under the radar in the sense of Texas Tech has the cash, right? They have the cash. I think that they can compete with almost damn near anybody when it comes to cash. The thing is the sponsorships and the deals like that they get done on the side in terms of the company deals and everything. That's where Texas Tech, I think, has to do a better job moving forward, where they have some of that right now in place, but they need to get it at a larger scale with bigger companies. Because you're seeing guys, go to, let's just use University of Southern Cal right now. You're seeing them with, big time Fortune 500 companies and companies that are well recognized, right? And I'm not just using Caleb Williams. Just go look at other guys they have there and other guys across the country, right? Like, I think that's where Tech struggles the most right now. But I think as for where Texas Tech stands in the position that they are at, like, they're in a really good spot, in my opinion, on the NIL front. Let's see. We've got Richard here. If Toppin wants a future, he should choose Texas Tech. I'll say this. I think from a fit perspective, Tech is way better than Texas. Texas may be able to offer more money, other stuff. I don't know what the hell that means, but they may be able to offer that. But if you're strictly looking at like playing time and then situation in the sense of like knowing you're going to be the guy in the front court, Texas Tech is a no-brainer in that regard. But there's a lot of other things that are at play, right? So it's not just, recruiting fit anymore or relationships. Relationships are part of it. Fit is part of it, but there's also a bigger part of it now to a lot of people, which is that dinero, the pesos, whatever they call it in Europe. Yeah, cool. Let's see here. This from Matt. Very disappointing that we were going to strike out on all three, but glad McCaslin took swings, got to regroup and bring in some pieces that fit. Yeah. And again, it's not dead set that they miss on all three. I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, that's probably the most likely scenario, though, right now. And so when you look at that, it's like, okay, I agree with you, Matt. I'm glad they took the swings. But also, I think that it would be naive just to be satisfied with that. I think you have to regroup. I think you have to go in and self-evaluate. And as a staff, realize, okay, what could we have done better? What infrastructure do we need to get better at in terms of maybe it's NIL, whatever it is to land some of these guys? Because now, if you're Texas Tech, you're kind of behind the eight ball in a lot of ways, in the sense that your primary focus, and obviously they were talking to other guys too. You don't just have to talk to 3 recruits. Their primary focus, though, for the past really 7 to 10 days has been great Osobor, Trazarien White, and then obviously JT Toppin. And so you think about that. If that's your focus, you're obviously not focusing on other guys. And now that you've lost that time, can't get it back. Where do you go if you're Texas Tech? I think that that's the big question for the Red Raiders, because truthfully, I think they've done a good job at landing 3 really solid portal guys in Kevin Overton. I think he has all Big 12 type potential later on in his career. I think Fetty is a very, very serviceable big. Is he a starter? I don't think so. I think he's a guy that can probably play like 20 minutes and be really good on the defensive end, but he's a liability in a lot of ways on the offensive end outside of 5 feet away. And then you add arguably the best passer in college basketball in Elijah Hawkins. He's taken 2 teams as the lead guard to the NCAA tournament, started his career at Howard, transferred to Minnesota. He's been phenomenal. And so you kind of look at what they've done, and it's like, okay, those are 3 really good building blocks, but the swing and misses that you talked about right there, Matt, now they're behind the 8 ball in the front court. I mean, let's just call it what it is. And I don't think it's panic time by any stretch of the imagination, but I do wonder where Texas Tech goes next, if I'm being honest, in terms of some of these guys. I think Jalen Wells is definitely a guy to monitor. He's a guy that I'm very interested in. But there will be other names that surface this week, I'm sure of it. And as always, we'll keep you up to date here on the Back to 12 podcast channel. Again, you see it at the bottom of your screen there. Be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and join over 10,000. Yes, you heard that right. 10,000. Sincere thank you to each and every one of y'all that have subscribed. And if you haven't already, what are you doing? It's free daily videos on everything Texas Tech football or men's basketball all year long. We're keeping you up to date, whether it's on the gridiron, the hardwood, on the recruiting trail. We've got you covered right here on the most interactive and largest Texas Tech community on YouTube and the Back to 12 podcast channel. All right, this one from Joseph. I want Wells. Sounds like would be a good teammate. Yeah, I think Wells is probably the priority now for Texas Tech in terms of guys that Texas Tech could land from the NBA Combine. All right, this from Ryder Franks. Any ball handlers we have interest in? I'm glad you asked because Jacob Harris did a phenomenal job over there. There really isn't any right now because I'm being honest about it, Ryder. Their focus has been on the front court and adding a wing or something in the front court. There's a lot more guards in the portal than there are that can make an impact than there are bigs. And Texas Tech is focused on the bigs right now. If you remember, funny enough, obviously some bad circumstances, but Joe Toussaint did not commit to Texas Tech until 4th of July. So you can land really, really good guards that late. Now, obviously some things happened off the floor with Bob Huggins that we don't have to get into, but you can land a lot of talented guards late in the process. But right now, I think their focus is squarely on adding somebody in the front court, unless there's just an almost automatic, okay, if we get them on campus, they're going to commit type situation at the guard position. And right now, it doesn't sound like there is any of that currently for Texas Tech. Sorry about that. Let's see here. This from Kyle. Any JUCO or Division II interest? I haven't heard any. The only JUCO guy that I heard of was Buchanan, and he recently committed to Boise State. So, yeah, I think that happened because there was a lot of talk that White was going to commit to Texas Tech, or like they had another potential shot at him there. And then obviously he goes to TCU, or is likely to go to TCU, I should say. Who's that possible transfer from a rival? Yeah, I would look at MHP, Michael Harrison Pilot, football player. He's going to be switching from wide receiver to safety. If he does come to Texas Tech, he's currently on an official visit to the 806. And I know somebody down in Houston actually reported that a source told him that he committed. I think that might be a little premature, but it would be a massive addition for the Red Raiders if he were to commit to Texas Tech. Fun fact about MPH before we get back to basketball, Michael Harrison Pilot is actually really good friends with Javion Wilcox and Micah Hudson. So there's your in for the Red Raiders. Let's see. Oh, we got a good meme up there. We appreciate that. What about Jordan Riley? I personally haven't heard anything about Jordan Riley from anybody I've talked to from the Texas Tech side of things. I mean, he's a good player. I liked him, but I believe he's one of those dudes that I wouldn't be surprised if he stays in the Northeast, if I'm being honest. Didn't shoot very well last year, and I don't know if Texas Tech wants that on their roster. I think they're prioritizing, get some length, get somebody in the front court, but also shooting and then versatility, and then probably another primary ball handler. Maybe Riley is that guy, but I haven't heard anything about him. Mark, watching from North Carolina. If you haven't already, tell me where you're watching from for a shout out. Like the video as well, and keep the questions coming. I'm going to stop the live as soon as the questions are done. But, right now, again, the major talking points in this one in terms of Texas Tech and everything, you look at it, and Texas Tech not in a great spot for Trazarien White. Not in a great spot for Toppin either. And obviously already lost out on great Osobor to Washington. It's going to be one of those things where can you land 1, 2 guys from the NBA draft process? I mean, potentially, but I mean, that's a big if you're Texas Tech. Do you think Jalen Wells will get drafted? Will he get drafted or will he stay in the draft? I think that's two different questions. I think personally, he will return to college. I think that's probably the most likely scenario. I will say this. This is one of the worst drafts in recent memory. So if one of those fringe guys, one of those fringe guys, as I take that Jordan Riley off, I thought I had the right comment up there. Will Jalen Wells get drafted? It's bad, man. I mean, like, it's not a great draft. I'm sure there'll be some guys that have great careers, and maybe 1 or 2 turns into a really, really good player, all-star. But I think guys like Jalen Wells, I think they'd be better off coming to college for another year. And I wonder if the impact there in terms of him getting paid, a secured amount of money in college is better than the risk of not knowing where you're going to go and potentially playing in the G League and not making that much money. Not to mention, if he does go to Texas Tech, there's the factor that he gets to play with his best friend in D5, and then also one of his other good friends in Chance McMillan. So he's the name I'm probably watching most, if I'm being honest, about things for Texas Tech. But there's a long way to go in terms of his draft process. I believe the date they have to be out in terms of making a decision, in terms of are they going to stay in the draft or are they going to return to college, is May 29th. Don't quote me on that. It may be May 26th, but it's that week, May 26th or 29th, one of those days. So that's kind of the time range you're at. And you would hope by then Texas Tech has another commitment to the roster of some kind. So that's where you're at in terms of Jalen Wells. But if you ask me, will he get drafted? I don't think so. I think he returns to college. Do you think Grant will pursue JT even harder since options are limited, or leave it as is? They're not going to back out of it. I think they're still going to try to actively go after him. What will come of that? I don't know, but I do think that UT is in the lead. I mean, again, I think, JT, maybe he wants to be at Tech. Maybe he wants to be at UT. He's the only one that can answer that question. But from a fit perspective, I think he is much more valuable and will get much more exposure and minutes if he comes to Texas Tech. I'm sure somebody could call me biased for that, but go look at UT's front court. They're loaded there. I mean, they got the guy from Indiana State. They have the guy that transferred in there last year from Virginia coming back. I mean, they also brought in another guy in the front court, and they have a 4-star still there from the previous class. So, it's one of those deals where is JT the most talented guy out of those guys? Yeah, maybe. But there's a lot more, I should say a lot less wiggle room in terms of, actually being the best there. If he came to Tech, be the clear-cut best front court player for the Red Raiders, and you would see a lot of offense run for him. I think you would have a lot of pick and roll. I think you would see him very active on the outside. I think that Grant would really, really, like to see him shoot some threes. I know that that's an element of his game that he's trying to improve during the NBA draft process. And again, I don't want to say that Texas Tech is completely out of it. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I don't want to say they're out of it for JT right now, but I do think that Texas is the clear leader. I think that that's more than a fair statement when it comes down to it and everything, because again, you look at what you kind of look at everything in the sense of, okay, even if you land JT Toppin, looking up something real quick here about JT, just to make sure I have this right. But you think about it from this perspective, like if JT comes to Tech, right, he's a 4. Okay, maybe a 5. I think best case scenario, if you're Texas Tech, and this is best case scenario, probably pipe dream right now, if we're being honest. You start Toppin, you go D5, Wells, Overton, or Chance, and then Elijah Hawkins. Okay, you're still not the biggest team, but you're athletic as hell. You would still probably need another big, even if you landed a guy like Toppin. So I think there's a lot there in terms of the possibility, in terms of inserting him and him being a really, really good player from the jump for Texas Tech. I think an all-conference type guy. But again, Texas is in the lead right now, and I don't think that that's a hot take or anything. I think it's just the maybe the unfortunate reality right now for a lot of Tech fans. To answer your question here on Christian Anderson, I haven't heard anything about him. I haven't. This from Greg Biggs. Now, since the Wyoming coaches joined the Tech staff, could they flip the kid from Wyoming that committed to Copycat U? His dad was a Tech alum. It's interesting. I thought about that, Greg, and I think it could happen. But the name that I was talking to Austin and Jacob about last night that kind of stood out to me, and I'm going to butcher his name. I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm going to butcher this name. He's and it's funny. I'll read my text thread to you guys in terms of what I said. I won't read what they said. In terms of just watching film about this guy, I literally said, not me talking myself into Oliver Fubart as a scholarship player after watching less than 2 minutes of highlights of him. I hate myself. He's the guy that really stands out to me in terms of a guy that I would really, really be interested in from a flip perspective. Now, the interesting aspect for Oliver, and again, I butchered his last name. I apologize. It is Faubert, for those that want to look it up. He committed to Wyoming, but as soon as Linder took the assistant job at Texas Tech, he asked to get released from his national letter of intent. He's originally from Canada. I think he's a good enough player to be a guy that you give a scholarship to. Maybe doesn't play a ton of minutes this year, but is a guy that in maybe his sophomore campaign could be a really solid rotation player. And if he gains a little bit of weight, maybe even an impact guy down the road. So I think there's a lot there. And, you think about the guy that you're talking about here, Greg, is Wenzel. Shot around like 37% from 3 last year for the Cowboys up in Laramie. His dad is an alum. Texas Tech was going after him actively before White got involved in terms of they prioritized him instead of Wenzel. Wenzel went up and is going to play for Oklahoma State or no, TCU. Yeah, I think that you could see it, but I don't know how likely it is. I'm pretty sure he signed already. Signing doesn't mean anything until, the minute you actually play the game in modern college basketball. But maybe, but I wouldn't count on it right now, Greg, to answer your question. I think that's going to do it for me, guys. One more time, if y'all haven't already, I know I sound like a broken record here, but it really does mean a lot. We have quite a few people watching right now. It would mean the world to me if each and every one of y'all hit that like button. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, turn on that notification bell to stay in the know on all things Texas Tech men's basketball, 100% free all year long. We've got you covered, whether it's in the portal, in the high school ranks. We've got you covered if it's on the gridiron. We've even got football stuff on here. It's coming up soon, I promise. We've got football coming up. That's going to be heavy here in June. We'll be breaking down position previews for each group on the Texas Tech football team. We'll be talking about the Texas Tech men's basketball roster when it's complete, which may feel like 7 years from now with how slow the portal goes. I guess how fast the portal goes, but it feels like time goes a little slower this time of year in terms of making everything happen. But again, it's 100% free. It's the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube. It's the most interactive group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube. We're giving you free daily videos on everything you need to know. So again, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell to stay in the know on all things Texas Tech men's basketball and football all year long right here on the largest YouTube channel for Texas Tech fans. Of course, talking about the Back to 12 podcast channel.